Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of NASCAR Super Teams, Team Penske, Part 2, the 90s. Following an 11-year hiatus from NASCAR, Roger Penske re-entered the NASCAR Cup Series, starting at the beginning of the 1991 season. He named the NASCAR team Penske Racing South to differentiate between its IndyCar and sports car operations that it had. This would remain the team name until the late 90s. Rusty Wallace would become the team's driver, bringing his Miller Beer sponsorship with him, to drive a No. 2 Miller Genuine Draft Pontiac. In 1991, Wallace drove that black No. 2 Miller Genuine Draft Pontiac to a solid debut season for the team. His best start was first twice at Bristol in the spring and Richmond in the fall. His best finish was first twice at Bristol in the spring and Pocono in the summer. Jimmy Makar served as the team's crew chief for the majority of the season. Eddie Dickerson took over for the final 12 races as crew chief of the No. 2 team. They scored 2 poles, 2 wins, 9 top 5s, and 14 top 10 finishes, finishing 10th in final Cup Series point standings. The Penske Racing South team had a bit of a transitional season in 1992. Eddie Dickerson, who took over for Jimmy Makar in the middle of the 1991 NASCAR Cup Series season as crew chief of the 2 team, he was replaced by Buddy Parrott following race 17 at Talladega, after Parrott left the Jasper Racing No. 55 team that Ted Musgrave had been driving for. The team went winless and was 17th in points at the time of the switch. Parrott was able to guide the No. 2 team to a pole at Phoenix and a victory at Richmond, and they ended up resurfacing to 13th in final point standings. Overall, they scored 1 pole, 1 win, 5 top 5s, and 12 top 10 finishes. This was statistically Rusty Wallace's worst season since 1985. Now, the 1993 NASCAR Cup Series season, Rusty Wallace and that No. 2 Miller Genuine Draft Pontiac team had an incredible season. That, though, was marred by 2 major accidents at the superspeedways. That involved him flipping several times, and, in fact, breaking his wrist in a wreck at Talladega. He never missed a race, though. Buddy Parrott, he returned as crew chief to the team. His best start was first 3 times at Atlanta and Bristol in the spring and Dover in the fall. His best finish was a series high first 10 times at Rockingham both races, North Wilkesboro both races, Bristol and Martinsville in the spring, Loudon in the summer, Richmond, Dover, and Atlanta in the fall. He scored 3 poles, 10 wins, 19 top 5s, and 21 top 10s, finishing an incredible 2nd in final point standings. After a career year in 93, the Penske team went into 1994 aiming for similar results, and they essentially got them. Wallace, in that No. 2 in 94, they switched it Ford, so they could get factory support. So now it was the No. 2 Miller Genuine Draft Ford that Rusty Wallace was driving. His best start was first twice at Martinsville and Pocono in the spring, and his best finish was first 8 times at Dover both races, Martinsville both races, Rockingham, Pocono, and Michigan in the spring, and Bristol in the fall. All in all, the team scored 2 poles, 8 wins, 17 top 5s, and 20 top 10s, finishing 3rd in final point standings. For the 1995 NASCAR Cup Series season, Penske made the decision to replace Buddy Parrott with Robin Pemberton as crew chief of the No. 2 team. Wallace's best start was 3rd at Richmond in the spring. His best finish was first twice at Martinsville in the spring and Richmond in the fall. The team had a pretty solid season overall, scoring 0 poles, 2 wins, 15 top 5s, and 19 top 10s, finishing 5th in final point standings. Penske Racing South made their Craftsman Truck Series debut in 1996 with Rick Johnson at Portland in a No. 22 Red Dog Ford. He started 21st and finished 25th. In his 3 starts, his best start was 14th at Watkins Glen, and his best finish was 15th at Evergreen. Kenny Wallace made 6 starts. His best start was 7th, coming at IRP in the spring, and his best finish was 4th at North Wilkesboro in the fall. In those 6 starts, he scored 1 top 5 and 2 top 10s. Rusty Wallace made 1 start as well in the No. 22 Ford, this time bringing his Miller sponsorship along with him. He made 1 start at Nazareth, starting 7th and finishing 9th. So in 10 starts with the No. 22 truck team, Overall, they scored 1 top 5 and 3 top 10s. As for the Cup Series side of things, the number 2 Miller Genuine Draft Ford had a pretty solid season again in 1996. His best start was second at Martinsville in the fall, and his best finish was first 5 times at Martinsville, Sonoma, Michigan in the spring, Pocono in the summer, and Bristol in the fall. Throughout the season, Wallace was able to score 0 poles, 5 wins, 8 top 5s, and 18 top 10 finishes, finishing 7th in final point standings. That following season, in 1997, Penske had Wallace run one Xfinity Series race at Fontana in the fall, driving a number 2 Miller Lite Ford. He started 37th and finished 21st. This season, Miller switched from Miller Genuine Draft sponsorship to the Miller Lite sponsorship, changing the paint scheme from black and gold to blue and white. His best start was first at Bristol in the spring, and his best finish was first at Richmond in the spring. All in all, they scored 1 pole, 1 win, 8 top 5s, and 12 top 10s, finishing 9th in final points. After much disapproval from Rusty Wallace, Roger Penske made the decision to expand to 2 teams, after purchasing Carl Haas's interest in the Krampus Haas number 37 team, to form Penske Krampus Racing. Thus, the 37 team became the number 12 Mobil 1 Ford, and Rusty Wallace became the number 2 Miller Lite Ford. Mayfield's best start was first at Texas in the spring. In June, Mayfield was able to score his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory at Pocono, even leading the points for 4 weeks during the first half of the season. Overall, he scored 1 pole, 1 win, 12 top 5s, and 16 top 10s, finishing 7th in final points. As for Rusty Wallace, his best start was first 4 times, both races at Bristol, Dover in the spring, and Richmond in the fall. His best finish was first at Phoenix in the fall. Overall, he scored 4 poles, 1 win, 15 top 5s, and 21 top 10s, finishing 4th in final point standings. In 1999, Penske Krampus Racing again had both cars on the racetrack in the NASCAR Cup Series. They just didn't have quite as great a season as the team did in 1998, though they were still very competitive. Rusty Wallace in the number 2 Miller Lite Ford had a best start of first 4 times, at Bristol in the spring and Watkins Glen, Loudon, and Dover in the fall. His best finish was first at Bristol in the spring. Jeremy Mayfield in the number 12 Mobil 1 Ford, his best start was second at Rockingham in the fall, and his best finish was second at Darlington in the spring. Paul Andrews, a NASCAR Cup Series championship crew chief, who had served as Mayfield's crew chief for the past several seasons, was replaced by Peter Suspenzo at the conclusion of race 11 at Richmond. Overall, the team scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 5 top 5s, and 12 top 10s, finishing 11th in final point standings. So after being competitive in every other form of motorsports Roger Penske was involved in, finally he had built the foundation of a NASCAR dynasty. Overall, in 347 starts between the 2 teams, from 1991 through the conclusion of the 1999 season, they had scored 18 poles, 32 victories, 120 top 5s, and 181 top 10 finishes. In the next edition of NASCAR Super Teams, we will bring you Team Penske, the 2000s Evolution, Part 3. Thanks for watching, and take care.